for um, maybe the last 6 months. So it's been a big chunk of my time has been in theater for since August, I think, is when I started rehearsals for Psalm 91. But I had spent most of last year writing the play. So 6 months prior to rehearsals, I was writing, and then we started rehearsals, we did casting and all that stuff. So that was my production, and then I was in another production right after.
Can you tell us a little bit about Psalm 91? Am I right? Is that right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Psalm 91 is an autobiographical work. It's also um, it's a play, but it bends genre because there's poetry, um, there's dialogue, but then there's monologues that feel like a memoir or a living memoir. So I was really interested in um, how I could merge genres. And I kind of tell people that I create the way art arrives. So I'm not particular about like something being all poems. And showing up in a particular way, that it shows up as a poetry collection, or I wrote a poem, so I had to submit it to a publication. I feel like poetry can be on the sidewalk, it can be a play, it can I mean, it's already all over our music. It's the basis of all our lyrics, right? Um, so my plays tend to be a merge of genres, genre bending, I guess, between poetry and playwriting. I wrote a play called Simone years ago. It was about a Haitian immigrant who had temporary protected status from being a survivor of the earthquake and being in danger of being deported. And I had written that piece at the time because of what was happening, and it's happening again. I don't know. I might perform that next. But Psalm 91 goes through my healing journey. And I grew up as a pastor's kid in the church, very conservative, very sheltered life, but also I experienced a lot of trauma and assault, various forms of assault. And so the play deals with my healing journey from that and also grapples with my relationship with Christianity throughout that, and finding a spirituality that one embraces my healing journey, but also celebrates my roots. So I explore other forms of worship that are, um, I guess, closer. It would be a good way to say closer to uh, accepting me as a whole person. So I explore the sacred Black feminine. I explore concepts of Vodou because I'm Haitian and I grew up with a lot of sermons demonizing Vodou in church. And so the play kind of explores that. But yeah, that's what Psalm 91. So I'm not really releasing religion. It's more like it's a transformative experience of like the organized part of it is, I think, is what I'm releasing, but the spiritual aspect of connecting is something that transforms in the play.
What is it like to do something? Is this the first time you did something so autobiographical?
Yes. And it was terrifying.
Wow. And
I mean,
that,
I've written poems. I mean, people over the last, I've been performing professionally for like the last 15 years, and I've written poems that were personal. And some of my trauma has shown up in some of my poetry, especially like because, generally speaking, I'm writing about my life. And I write about social issues, but also the social issues often are very much connected to my life. So the poems have always been personal. I just have never told my story this holistically, um, like talking about my thoughts, my spirituality, my experiences, and I haven't really told the story this completely, and so that was terrifying. I just wrote through the fear, and I'm really proud of the work. I'm really proud of not running away from it. But yeah, I think that, I say that I was writing for half of the year last year, but if I'm really being honest, I've been trying to write this thing for a very, very long time. And it's shown up in pieces and bits in other smaller pieces. It's been revised, and this is the first time that I've written something that I feel like really tells the story the way that it needed to be told. So
Would you start writing and then think, oh my God, I can't share that? Or what am I doing? Or, I mean, what kind of questions were coming up for you as you were, kind of like just pouring out all the stuff and really making yourself vulnerable? And then you performed it and you shared it, in public. So I don't know, there's a lot of emotions and kind of fear and kind of what are people going to think about this story? But at the end, you just have to do it because you have to get it out, right? For you.
yeah.
Yeah.
hmm hmm Um, well, for one, my parents weren't invited to the play.
Right.
Um,
Because it's
and
a little sensitive. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's sensitive. Also, they lived it with me, like they know what I went through, and it wasn't pretty, so like they didn't need to experience that again. But everyone knows me as D. Colin, right? And so this play deals with the person I was before D. Colin, right? And so this is little Danielle growing up, right? So this is a whole other piece of my life that a lot of people don't know about. And I think that's the scary part, is like sharing with folks who know your work or familiar with your work or are fans or supporters, or they've known you for some time now, and they could have never imagined you went through any of the things that you're talking about. But in the writing process, the more that I wrote, the more I felt like there's a reason why I feel the urgency to tell this story now. Um, and I mean, part of that is political, but also part of that in the writing process, I started to realize that um, because people have known me for so long, it's hard for them to imagine that I've had this kind of trauma in my life, because of who I am and how what my personality is like, or um, and when we did the table reading, even the cast, I've known all the actors in the cast. We chose them intentionally because I wanted to feel safe in the room. And I wanted to have folks in the room who would support me, and make space and room for me, um, and who would really like embrace what I was trying to do. And so, but all of those folks I've known since like 2009, 2015, just a long time to know people, and for them not to know, like, you know, like really pivotal things that have happened to you in your life. And there wasn't a dry eye around the table, including mine. And I think the impact is that when we tell our stories, especially when people uh, don't think it could happen to you, I think it actually increases the impact of the story, that it can happen to anyone, right? That your sister, your brother, your mother, your friend, your classmate, there's so many people who are going through an experience that we don't see. And the impact of knowing them as people and then knowing what's happened to them, I think it hits home differently. And so for whatever reason, the universe had me telling the story now, and I couldn't get it. I was like, I have to do this. I felt really compelled to do it. And so yeah, terrified or not, I I told the story. Yeah.
For this, thank you for sharing all that.
Mhm.
For this class, these are all music majors to some degree. Um, Maybe do you want to share a little bit about like do you mind, or you want me to do it? Okay, so we have a drummer. Yeah, I'm a little out of frame over here. And we have three composers, all right? So Grace and Kyan and Aaron. And then Elena is a vocalist, but she's getting a grad degree, like a general music degree
For education, yeah.
for education.
Okay.
We're missing Sierra, who is a music teacher and a choral conductor. She's not here tonight. She's not feeling well. But for this class, all of these guys have been writing their artist statements about what's important to them. And then they've been creating a project that is connected to who they are, that we're basically walking through the steps to write a grant application, to learn how to ask for funding for things.
Mhm.
But, we were talking earlier about making an impact, and how do you know if you're making an impact, or in what way? And the way you described how your experience may resonate, so you're telling the story may resonate with somebody, and they can say, okay, so that's the impact, that you're telling the story. And so here we have, like Quentin wants to record his first album with his band. So we're talking about what kind of impact would that be? Well, it would raise the profile of the band. It would get the tunes out, maybe on streaming. Aaron is interested in writing a musical for a community, local community group. Kyan wants to commission Asian American composers so that there can be more understanding about Asian music theory, which is different from Western music theory. And Grace wants to commission composers to write pieces for like pedagogical vocal pieces that are that have underrepresented composers writing, so that performers can feel that they're represented in the music that they're creating, that they're performing. And Elena wants to create a video game, or a demo of a video game, to give voice to. You want to share?
Yeah, to give voices to overlooked communities, especially like the LGBTQ plus and neurodivergent communities.
And so they're all looking for ways to how they can make impact in their, as an artist, right? And that's what we want to do. We want to make connection with people. So I don't know if you have anything more to share about making impact. And it's also you hope to make an impact. You don't know if you will, but if it resonates with you to do that thing, you should try to follow it, right?
Mm-hmm. I think part of it, one, I start with myself. So I'm never writing something that I am not first writing for myself. And I feel like this is kind of like that the when you get on an airplane and they tell you the whole thing about like you have to put on your mask first, before you help someone else with their mask. I feel like I start with myself before I start with the audience. And so I want to write as if no one is reading this, no one is ever going to see this. I want to write for me first, because I have to feel it first. I have to believe it first. And if I don't believe it or trust what I'm saying, then I can't get any audience to believe or trust what I'm saying. So I start with me, and that requires listening. And so because it requires listening, I make space for how I want to show up for my writing. Um, and that means, oh, okay. Sorry, my tablet's listening to me. Let me turn this off. Um, oh, I lost my train of thought. Oh, I make space. Yeah, I make space for my writing. And that means that I kind of have to, I've had to study myself. So when's the best time to create? When's the time of day that my imagination is the most playful? Um, and for me, that's the morning time. I wake up before the sun. I make some tea. I light a candle. I journal for a little while, and then I work on a piece. And that's before the uh, noise of the world starts, or before my husband wakes up. So that's I try to curate space for me to create. And when I pour into my creativity that way, then the delivery, it translates in the delivery, if that makes sense. And so I know that every piece that you write isn't for everyone, right? It's not gonna touch everyone the same way. I might do the same poem in 50 different cities, and in all those cities, there'll be a person who latches onto a different line. And so every piece of art hits differently for different people. Um, but part of it is like trusting that I'll reach at least one person. Um, and so if I'm in a room full of people, at least one person is going to get something from what I'm saying. And every time I affirm myself and I listen to myself, I'm very attentive and intentional with what I'm writing. That translates in the connection that it has with other people. Um, and the more that happens, I think the easier it is for you to trust the whole process of impact and connecting with people. And I mean, really, it's all about storytelling, right? When we get to know each other as people, we're just telling stories, and art is just it's a curated way to tell a story, um, in a particular genre or whatever medium, right? Um, and when we tell stories, we feel empathy, we can relate to certain things. We're always looking for our human experience when we're listening to other people. But part of the creating part is understanding our own human experience, and the excavation of that is what art is.
How you talked about, yeah, figuring out what works best for you for creating a space for doing your thing. You have like certain time of day, certain thing that you need to do, like for me, for the mornings, I practice, that's the time. I practice, I write, I plan, I make connections, I think about ideas. What do you guys, does anybody want to share anything that works for them? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, practice in the morning because I feel like that takes the most amount of effort. I need that energy first thing in the morning. I couldn't do that in the evening, but in the opposite, I actually like to create in the evening. Um, Especially like late at night for some reason, like when I'm getting ready to go to bed, that's when all the ideas will come and I'll be like, great, now I gotta go back to my computer, start working on something. So.
And it's important that you know this about yourself, right? Yeah, you were nodding. This is the same for you.
Yeah, I mean, like, I typically prefer to like do all of my like social related things during the day, whether that's networking or, doing anything like that. And then I think like anytime past 7 or 8 p.m., if I can just have the time to kind of like go sit somewhere by myself, and just like be surrounded by my surroundings and just like create ideas that way. That's
How many of you need some quiet time? Some solitary, like alone time, right? How many of you need nature? Need to be outside? Yeah, I need it. To me, if I'm not out every now and then. But yeah, it's important to know what you need in order to do your thing, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm making
And
sure-
that goes for inspiration as well. Like when I teach workshops, I often say like inspiration isn't this thing that like hits you over the head, it's like that light bulb that goes off every time, because it doesn't always show up that way. Inspiration is something you have to kind of work for. And so like I'm also very attentive to like spaces where I feel inspired. What's around me when I feel inspired, who's around me when I feel inspired, what event did I go to, what activity was I doing when I felt inspired. And so I don't believe in like writer's block or whatever blocks. It's really like, okay, what activity do I need to do right now to um, open that door again or open the window? It's just it's something that is more intentional than it's something that we work at or instead of something that happens to us, if that makes sense.
I like going to art museums also. This kind of like science museum or these different kinds of experiences where you can get, yeah, this kind of different stimulation or different way of thinking about something, right?
Mhm.
You guys have anything that you like to do for inspiration? To welcome inspiration, yeah.
listen.
Listen
Yeah.
to music, yeah, yeah. For ideas, for compositional ideas, yeah. Any particular genres? Whatever
Yeah.
calls you, yeah, Grace, what did you
I was going to say similarly to kind listening, but specifically, I find so much more inspiration from live music. So going to concerts, and even if it's not necessarily my style of composition, just being like, oh, this is a new idea. And a lot of times I will walk out of concert halls like with a new melody in my mind or just a concept for a piece. And then I have to go back home and write it down.
We need these things, right, to continue, yeah, what were you gonna say?
I like using like reference tracks, like I've been doing this a lot more recently, where if I have a project idea in mind, and there's a specific thing I want to do, I'll find like for example, the musical that I'm currently writing, it's a rock-based musical. And because I'm still not quite familiar with writing for rock, I'd go and listen to a bunch of artists that I liked, and I started picking out the elements that I wanted to use. And kind of going for that practical mind. So.
Yeah. Anybody else want to talk about inspiration? Yeah.
Generally for me, so I'm also like a visual artist. But what really inspires me is being in like my online communities. My friends will like post their own artwork and I'll be like, oh, I actually like I want to get in on this too. Like we'll like start working on things together. So I also see inspiration as like a collaborative thing as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, inspiration is so important. Have to make space for it and, kind of figure out the things that speak to us. Or maybe try something new also, right? Right? Do something new that you haven't done before. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why I flow between genres and creative mediums so much because I'm a visual artist and I'm an actor and I'm a poet and I was just in a musical, so I can sing. So sing and dance, right? And in Psalm 91, I played a little piano because I played 8 years of piano, so I had to have piano in the play. But yeah, it's like when I say create the way art arrives, it's also being receptive to inspiration coming from a number of different places and just seeing what happens when you combine things or mix things up or try something that you haven't seen, because that's part of the creative process is to, you borrow, right? What is that? The good artist steal or something like that.
Feel like
But if okay, look at that.
feel like an artist.
We're
Yeah.
on this, we're on the same wavelength.
Actually, it's the first time that I brought this book, so there you go. Yeah, this is a nice book.
There's like I don't remember the quote now, but there's a quote where like the gist is if you take from like one or two ideas and you're stealing, but if you take from like 50 ideas and combine them, then you're really like just you're all you're doing is creating, you're curating like experience, right? So I like to think of it that way. It's like I take things from all different points in the universe and put them together, and then I have created a new star, right? So yeah, something like that. But
So what are you working on next?
um right now I am focusing on submitting poems. And I'm working
Kind of like open calls.
yeah, open calls. I've been submitting, well, last year I submitted more often than I normally do. But I'm not writing anything new right now. I actually what I'm really trying to say is I'm not writing another play. I wrote a play last year, because I do different things. I kind of have to plan out my years, what I'm gonna focus on. So last year was theater, um, and this year is poetry. So I'm organizing different poetry events, and I'm re-releasing a poetry collection that I published in 2019, which kind of fell through the cracks of the pandemic. And so whoever the first 50 people were who bought that collection are the only people who have that book. So I'm re-releasing that. And it'll look and sound different than the first publication. And then my first book, Dreaming in Kreyol, turns 10 this November. So I'm releasing an anniversary edition of Dreaming in Kreyol. So this year the focus is poetry, but I'm also painting. I'm painting a collection, doing a series of self-portraits for a solo exhibit that I plan to put on next year. So next year the focus is visual art, and then I'll go back to writing plays. So it's in rotation, but also like because the focus is poetry this year doesn't mean that I might not also write a play. It also doesn't mean that I'm not painting as well. I'll be painting all this year to be ready for next year, where visual art is the focus next year. So yeah, I think about like what I want to release, and next year or in the next 5 years, and what does that look like? And then I think in very large general terms of like, well, what will the theme of that year be so that I know what kind of work to focus on? Because I do a lot of different things. And sometimes I can get lost in the sauce if you're not sure what you want to create. So I always have a ballpark of what my goals are for the next year, and then I make plans. Um, all of December is planning month for me, so that I kind of know what my months are going to look like, and what I need to focus on to get to the part of releasing the work to the world.
About how you freelance, right?
Hmm.
Talk a little bit about that as a life. Like, what's in that? Like, how do you sustain yourself? How do you support yourself? And
Well, you need multiple streams of income to make this work. Um, there is no poet. I haven't met them who makes their money just from writing poems. So I have to diversify how I make money, and that means that I have merch. I have things that I sell. As a poet, as a visual art, I sell prints, so I have physical merch for people to purchase. I
that's
also have
yeah.
I have services, right? And so I teach workshops, and that's a stream of income for me. The workshops might happen at an organization, might happen at a school. Um, I used to teach high school and middle school. I've also taught college students, so I have an array of classrooms that I can visit, and so that's a stream of income is going into places. I also offer my own stuff online, and in person, and that people can come and attend. So teaching workshops is one of my streams of income. The other stream of income is commissions. So I might have folks who want me to write a poem for an occasion, or for I've written poems for fundraising campaigns. I wrote a poem for United Way for their fundraising campaign, and that was a commission piece. And then I wrote the poem, I came in, they recorded it, and then they sent it to all the United Ways. So that there's like commissions is another way to bring in income. Um, and what else? Those are my three main ones. But then,
Um,
I paint murals. That's a stream of income. Um, that would be a service, is like painting the mural. But that's usually like through contract, and so you have to like be creative about your creativity in order to make sustainable income. And then you have to have like consistent visibility online. And that can look like a lot of different things. That could look like I mean, the I think the most obvious one is, what you post on social media. But it could also look like having an e-list, and sending out a newsletter every week, which is something that I do. And you can also find other ways to stay connected to people. Through video, through Patreon, I mean, there's so many. I think like we're living in a time when there's like so many things available to the artists to get people to connect to the work that they're doing. But all of that is, all of those are just methods to drive traffic to the things that will potentially bring you income. So it's really it's not for the folks who don't feel motivated. You gotta be really motivated. And if you're someone who needs motivation, you have to think about, how do you care for yourself so you're not burnt out, and finding ways to like make sure you are in tune with what your body needs, what your mind needs, so that you can do the administrative part. Because being an artist is, I mean, often we go to school. I got a bachelor's in English, and, I got a master's degree, and, I got all the learning, but no one taught me the business of being a poet in college. They just didn't, and I took some art classes as an undergrad, and I took some music classes in undergrad, and they were all about creating. They were about creating, or they were about the history, and not necessarily the business part. And so I think a lot of artists are out here just kind of winging it on how to do the business part. But really, you okay, so if you ever picture an iceberg, like the tip of the iceberg is the creative part. That's the part everybody sees, like the music that they hear, the play that they went to, the book that they just bought. That's the top of the iceberg. And then the bottom of the iceberg, which is a very massive piece of ice in the ocean. It's so big. It's like it doesn't even make sense that the top is so small, right? That part is taxes and your DBA and following up with people and sending your invoice and editing your website, and it's all of these administrative things that aren't necessarily creative. So you have to think about, okay, what, how can I care for myself the best way to get all of those administrative things done? Um, so yeah, diversifying how you deliver your art to folks, and also thinking about what your process is and um, the administration part of your business as an artist. Yeah.
Thoughts or any questions? Anything that resonated? Diversifying, right? All the business stuff. You were talking about how do we create a life so we can create? How can we create a life so we can create? And do you ever do like residencies or
Mhm.
where you go? Do you have any experience doing that? And did you find that valuable? Have you guys ever? We've maybe talked a little bit about residencies. Sometimes they're paid, sometimes they're not, but you can have some space to do your art. So that can be like another way to create space. Yeah, for
Yeah.
want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that those spaces are really important. I I am I was a VONA fellow, VONA Voices of Our Nation Art Foundation fellow twice. I went in 2011, I went in 2018. And that's a week long. It was, well, they're doing it differently now. But when I was there, um, it was a whole week. It used to happen at UC Berkeley, and we'd be on campus for a week. I'm also a Cave Canem alum, and that's a week at University of Pittsburgh and Greensburg every year. And I went in 2019, 2022, 2023, graduated. So that was a 3-year fellowship. Um, well, you have 5 years to complete it 3 times. So I did that. I've also been like a poet in residence for creative festivals. One in Vermont with Next Stage Theater and Sandglass Theater. That was a very cool experience. That was the first time I thought about, oh, I can do this full time. I can go be a poet full time. This is a thing. Because I got paid to do a few workshops. I also got paid to perform. Oh, that's my other stream of income, performances. So I get paid to go perform poetry, different places around the country, um, sometimes out of the country. Less of that now, but pre-pandemic, I was going out of the country. Um,
A performance with 5 by 5, right?
yeah, yeah. So I've traveled to perform, and I get paid to do that. But yeah, it's I lost my train of thought again. Um,
Diversifying and all the different ways and creating space and like residencies and fellowships and
yes, yeah. So yeah, I was in Vermont and they paid me to teach workshops, to perform. They paid for my lodging. And they paid for all my meals, and they even gave me pocket money to go like spend in town.
you
And I
guys.
said, "Oh shoot, I think I could be a full-time artist."
So great. Has anybody had an experience like that where you were supported by some fellowship or residency, or you went somewhere and you were able to do your work, your art for a period? Has anybody had, yeah.
Not quite, but actually that was kind of leading to the question I want to ask. At what point in your career do you know that you are ready for that? Like, is it the kind of thing that someone else comes up to you and says, hey, we want to invite you to come, do this residency? Or is it kind of a thing where you're slowly like prodding along, like seeing what connections, what will allow you to do this, and maybe you email here to see if they're willing, kind of thing. Um,
Um, I I have been really blessed by word of mouth. Um, and that that really comes with how you connect with people, especially at events or things that you're at. It also really comes from talking about what you do. And so I had to really learn to make myself visible in person. And also, people really um, enjoy quality work, So if you are pouring into your work and the work is quality, people will talk about it. People will talk about it. They will recommend you. They will have somebody reach out and say, "Hey, I had them at my organization. They did this and they did this work with the community, and you might want to reach out to them too. Here's their email." That kind of thing really helped me a lot. Especially when I shared with people what my goals were. I want to be a full-time artist. I want to travel. I want to be able to reach certain communities. Like people will reach out once you make it known what it is you want to do, and people will share with other people when they see your work, and the work kind of speaks for itself. Um, I started getting commissioned to show up to the protests. And that was because of the nature of a lot of my poems. I deal with a lot of social issues. But also when I showed up to the protests, I don't know, I get people to listen to the poem, right? And so people are like, we're going to talk about environmentalism. Can we get D. Collins to do a poem about that? And so um, if your passions are known, if you're sharing your passions, what you're passionate about, what communities you really want to work with, um, people will notice that, and they'll reach out. That doesn't mean that you don't have to also do the work. So I find it also helpful to send thank yous to people who've booked me before. I find it helpful to stay connected in other ways. And that makes it easier when like, there's a lull or stuff isn't going the way that you want it to, for you to be vulnerable. Because now you're not just reaching out because you need something. You've just been reaching out because you want to connect with people, right? And if we start with that place, it makes it a lot easier to build your village. Because every artist needs a village. Yeah. I hope that answers the question. But
it does, thank you.
okay.
Any other questions? Isn't she fantastic? So wonderful. Maybe as a last question, because a lot of these guys are, they're still in school and they're still figuring out who they are and what's important to them. They know what they're more or less kind of studying, they have a path. But do you have any advice as you're like getting started? They're probably, you guys are gonna go on for your masters, I guess, right? And maybe doctorates, what we'll see, but what advice do you have for artists who are just getting started? Do you have any advice, any kind of things for them to think about as they are, finishing one degree, starting another, but continuing to think about their work as artists and what they want to do, what impact they want to have in the world? Right?
Um, there's a quote by Octavia Butler that's coming to mind, um, about habit. And what did she say? She says something like forget inspiration. Habit is more dependable. And so I would really encourage, like if you know this is the path that you want, I really would encourage you to build habits now, to think about, what your creative practice can look like. And it took me a while to figure out how to even be my own boss. What does that look like? I've been a person who's had a job since I was 16, 16, 17 years old, right? And I had a boss, I had a supervisor. I've also been a boss, I've been a supervisor, at a nonprofit organization. I've been an educator. I had people supervising me, evaluating me. I had hours. I was working 40-hour weeks. I've done 40-hour weeks. I've done part-time jobs, right? And so it's structured differently. That doesn't mean I have to take all of those things, all of the elements of the traditional workspace into my creative space. That my creative space can function differently than how a workspace would function if I was just showing up to a job. And so I had to unlearn some things from working, and and you know the expectations of traditional workspace doesn't necessarily apply to my creative space. And so I have to like really think about what does my creative space need for me to be my most productive and my most efficient, um, and my most creative self, right? So I would think about that. You have room now to kind of imagine, to see what that can look like. You also have a little room to experiment, right, with what your creative practice can look like on a daily basis. That's something that I had to kind of learn over time. It took me a while to figure out. So yeah, and especially since nobody's teaching us that. We're just kind of like figuring it out. Like, oh, I actually don't want to do that, And now I have like my studio space. I have a separate studio space. I used to work out of my apartment. And I don't take anything home from the studio. As a teacher, I took work home all the time. Like that was just a normal thing to take work home. I was correcting papers, and I was teaching too many sections of ELA and I had like 80 students. Um and but the 80 students, I was teaching two sections of ELA. I was teaching creative writing, I was teaching newspaper writing, and then I was teaching some kind of like reading writing clinic. So I couldn't even like recycle lesson plans, and that was taking a lot of work home. I don't do that now as an artist. And that was something I had to unlearn. It's like I don't have to take this home. I can leave it at the studio. So yeah, I don't know. I think that while we're in school, it's an opportunity to learn what we're learning, but also it's an opportunity to experiment with what our future selves might want to do with our time, you know?
Thoughts, you guys? Anything else? Thank you so much for all that. Absolutely wonderful.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I hope this was helpful.
My dear, you're wonderful and amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you from all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, my dear.
You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.